How's our wonderful library director doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, I got to follow up with you on the conversation we had. Okay.
Absolutely. I'll be in all the rest of the week. So,
Okay. I think there's some good news.
yeah, good. Good.
Is it just you and I? Where's everyone?
No, we're here. Be careful what you say. Be careful who you talk about.
Madam President, I've started the recording. You're all set.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. I'm going to turn this meeting over to Dr. Padilla.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, everyone. I hope you're in good spirits. And as Ms. Mineo said to us today, hope you got outside to get some fresh air. And if you didn't today, hopefully you do one day this week. So we have three presentations. Madam President, I'm just going to move one of them around. I'm going to start off with 2.1, and then we're going to move up 2.3. So let me just share my screen for a second. Okay, so another edition of the Operation Reopen. So we do have some updates for our board and our community. So there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of planning relating to athletics and to testing. So I need to share with the community that given that we are still in the yellow zone, our practices and games will be impacted. So as of right now, and this is coming from the Department of Health, schools in the yellow zone cannot practice who have more than 25 people as a gathering, which means for those sports that clearly have more than 25, they won't be able to practice within the district. And for those who have those kinds of gatherings, they also won't be able to play their games. We are working with neighboring districts to collaborate with them in order to play our games at their field. I mean, we had, we're the home team in some cases, we're the away team in other cases. It appears that we're always going to have to be the away team at this point. I understand that that probably will be a concern to our athletes and coaches and families because we lose the home field advantage. But at this point, this is something that is completely out of our control. This is not a Board of Ed decision. This is not a district decision. This is coming from the Department of Health, and we have to comply. So I understand that might be a hardship in some cases, but those are the rules that we have to operate under. I want to just quickly mention that our seniors, we have a special place for you. We understand that your senior year has been impacted just like last year's seniors. And so we do have a couple of seniors now working with our administrators in all 4 of our campuses, the night school, West, North, and Main, to prepare something special for this year's senior class. So to the seniors who are part of this planning team, I want to say thank you. To our administrators who are leading this process, I want to say thank you as well. And you're going to start to hear more and more information coming out regarding what the senior experience for the second half of the year is going to look like. What we can commit is that we're going to make it special for you. We can't make it how it used to be. And last year's seniors really struggled with that. And they walked away with a really good experience. And that's exactly what we're going to do for you. So just be on the lookout. We're going to be providing information shortly. So that way you can prepare, you can plan. And again, our goal here is to make your senior year a special one. I want to talk a little bit about social distancing and where the district's at in its planning. As I indicated to our Board of Education, we have had a singular focus as it relates to Operation Reopen. And we called it that for a reason. It's because we're trying to reopen. And we're trying to reopen at some point where we get more children and we have more days of in-person instruction. So I understand that there are families anxiously waiting, wanting to know more about what the district's going to do. I know there's a lot of news from surrounding districts around what they have started to do. And I just have to respectfully say, we're not those other districts. We're still in the yellow zone. And in some cases, we are 10 times the size of those other districts. So it's going to take us a little bit more time to plan. And we want to do it carefully. Our focus has been to reopen schools safely. So right now, the team is looking into a range of different options to provide some mitigation materials. And as you can see here from the images, we're taking a look at face shields. We're taking a look at dividers. We're taking a look at sneeze guards. In the event the Department of Health says, okay, all schools can move to 3 feet and maybe not have some of these other pieces of equipment, that will be something we'll take into consideration. Where we're at as a district is we're offering 4 days of instruction, in-person instruction. So for families who have opted in for in-person instruction, we are moving as fast as we can, but as safely as we can, to be able to offer 4 days of instruction for every school. And right now we are looking at, when we return back from spring break, we believe that all of our schools will be able to offer the 4 days of instruction. And I understand, because now there are families saying, we want 5 days of instruction. We're not there yet. Right now, the district is going to hold tight with 4 days. We're going to have some continuity and some stability in the 4-day model before considering 5 days. And I know that might be a hardship. We're just asking for your continued grace and your continued flexibility and patience. We want to make sure we get this right. So currently, as you know, we have the blue gold model. We're transitioning into just one in-person instructional model while honoring the 100% option as well. So that will continue. Back in January, I told families that we were considering requiring every child to come in for the 4th quarter in person, so that way they would have that experience. And tonight I'm here to tell you that that decision is no longer on the table. We are going to honor fully remote for those families who chose it for the 4th quarter. And then those families who chose in person will continue through the 4th quarter. Will we do 5 days? Well, that's something under consideration if we feel it's safe enough and we're comfortable enough to do it. So as of today, I'm telling our community, we're going to stay tight with the 4 days. Wednesday will continue to be an asynchronous day. If that changes in the 4th quarter, we'll certainly inform you of that. But right now, our priority is to continue to reopen safely. So just looking ahead, there are a couple things that every district in New York State right now is really grappling with. So we have state exams, and I got to tell you, I'm feeling very uncomfortable about this. And there are tons of questions that we have. Will our remote students be required to test? Will they be required to come in? Will they have to test from home? We understand that the Board of Regents will have a resolution in front of them early next week where they're going to decide whether they're going to require state tests. Right now, from what the state education department is communicating, their recommendation is to cancel the state exams, which then means that we would be under an obligation federally to require our children to test for the for specific exams, and there's 4 of them. So we have to wait until next week to see what that vote turns out to be. And I know there's debate on this. There are people who feel like you got to test so that way you can understand where kids are at. I'm on the opposite end of that debate. I think we have information. We're working with our teachers. We have formative assessments. We have periodic assessments. We're doing what's needed to get a gauge on how our children are performing. Nevertheless, it's a federal requirement, so we'll have to do it. And we're just waiting for what that's going to look like. We also know that the state education department sent out a survey today, getting information from districts around the kinds of assessments that they have going on. And we will begin to complete that survey prior to its due date. And as you can see from what I have here, there's a range of different considerations. So once we know what actually will happen, then we'll start to move forward with what's required of us. I don't want to just brush over this slide. I know it's one that we've had consistently. And all I want to say is this: it's getting warmer. It's getting nicer outside. There's more vaccines, and that's all good. But we have to remain diligent. We have to continue to mask up. We have to continue to watch our distance. And while it might feel like it's more comfortable to disregard the mitigation strategies that we've had in place, I'm here to tell you not to do that. Continue to protect yourself and continue to protect those around you. Madam President, that concludes tonight's update for Operation Reopen.
Thank you. I see your hand, Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. So on the 3-foot rule, does the New York State Education Department give you guidance as to how that can be done properly? And does New York State Education Department allow 3-foot rule within a yellow zone?
I don't have the answers to all of those questions, but I will say it's not so much the state education department that's driving this. This is actually a Department of Health guidance. So even the state ed department has to follow that guidance. What the guidance indicates at this point, and what you probably are seeing happening in the region, is that there are schools moving to 3 feet. So the guidance says you can move to under 3 feet as long as you have the right equipment and the PPE in place. So as a district, what we're doing is we are researching a range of different PPE, the barriers, the guards. Are they in compliance with fire code, et cetera? So there's a range of different things we have to do. We are in the process of researching that. We have a number of different quotes before we move forward and determine if that's the route we're going to go.
Mr. Levinstein, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam President. So, a couple questions on this yellow zone designation. Okay, obviously it affects education, it affects testing, it affects athletics. So my first question is there any other district in Orange County beside part of Newburgh that is in a yellow zone designation? And do you think there's any chance we will be able to get out of that yellow zone designation?
Yeah, 2 good questions. So the first one being, no, there's no other community in Orange County that is in the yellow zone. And then the second one, I really don't have the answer to, because it's more about the community than it is about the school district. So when we did our 20% required testing, we did so, and that came back under 1%. So I can't tell you. I know there are people asking whether or not that designation is going to be lifted. I hope it's lifted soon, because that would be a good indication the numbers are moving in the right direction, but that's really governor's office.
And one quick question, please, Madam President. The 25 students that are allowed to participate, is that same rule apply whether it's an indoor sport like volleyball or an outdoor sport like football? Are they treating it the same?
It's not 25 students, it's 25
25
people, isn't it?
Yeah,
People.
25 people.
Correct. But are they treating an indoor sport the same as an outdoor sport?
In this case, they're saying any gathering of 25 people in a yellow zone. So we believe if you take sort of volleyball in this case, they should be okay to practice because their team doesn't have that many people. Now we would have to closely take a look at what happens when they play another team. Will that exceed 25 people? And if it does, then they won't be able to compete in district.
And it's the same applies outdoors on a football field, 100 where people could be 100 yards apart.
Yeah, that's our understanding right now.
Mr. Forget, your hands up?
Yeah, and I just wanted to make you aware that it's one gathering inside the building. So if you have one team participating or practicing in the building, you just can't exceed the 25. So for example, you can have Fine and Performing Arts doing the drama as well as the volleyball team practicing, and we've addressed that today.
Wow. Thank you.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. So Dr. Padilla, just for clarity, the pecking order. Well, so it goes from the governor's office to the state health, to the state education department, to the county health. Help me out with that order, because so much information that we've been getting is one is saying one thing, one is saying another. Whose word is the word? And where do we fall in that pecking order? Do we make any unilateral decisions, or are we prisoners to everything they tell us to do?
I mean, I guess there's a few ways to answer that question, but I'll just say right now, the State Department of Health is, as it relates to this health pandemic, they're the ones providing the guidance. And to be honest, I'm not sure in terms of a pecking order then where it goes. My understanding, it goes to the entire state, but I would like to believe there's conversations with the state education department as it relates to schools.
So then why are so many different schools doing so many different things?
So I think as it relates to athletics, I don't know if they're doing different things. They're following whatever guidance they're allowed, right? So for instance, spectators. Now, spectators, I probably would agree with you, different districts are doing a range of different things, but they're doing it within what's allowed.
Okay.
So some districts are saying no spectators. That is a local decision.
Okay.
Another district will say up to 2 people, that's okay. Right? So that does vary, but they're working within the guidance.
Got you. Thank you.
Mr. Stridarn, hang on a second. Before I call on you, I want to talk to something that Mr. Levenstein brought up about working with the community. Well, this past week, Dr. Padilla, Mr. Forget, and I had a call with Mr. Skoufis, and we talked to him about working inside of our communities that needed the most assistance in order to talk about testing and about, getting vaccinations. And I believe it was a sort of productive meeting. And we're going to continue to have those meetings because I think it's important, because what we do is, hand in hand with what our community does, and what our community does surely affects what happens in our schools. Dr. Padilla, would you like to add something about that?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for, Ms. Maneo's been advocating to get more resources into the community, get vaccines. We've been asking folks to partner with the district. I mean, we're the largest employer. We're one of the largest entities in the region. We want to make sure our employees are prioritized. And the best way to do that is to collaborate with us. So thank you, Ms. Maneo, again. And we'll continue to tell people we're here to collaborate. We're here to partner. Please prioritize school employees so that way we can continue with Operation Reopen.
Thank you. Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. So if you could go back to that slide that you had with the barriers, I think if you do decide to go to a 3-foot rule, the best situation would be for the face guards, because if you do the desk partitions where each desk has those plastic partitions and you have students coughing on them, and they're going to have to get cleaned all of the time, at least daily, maybe even more if at the secondary level, because students might change classes. And who's going to clean them? You're not going to have the teachers clean them. You're going to have the custodial staff clean them. We don't have enough people to clean thousands of desk guards every day. So if you do the face guards, at least those could be sanitized. And I think the kids would get used to them. I mean, it's not the best situation, but they could decorate them in elementary level, but at least it's something that's workable. As far as the situation with the bringing more people back into the schools, are you going to have situations where right now you have staff eating in their cars and eating in the hallways? If you bring in more students and you're going to be bringing back more staff, will you have the space in the buildings to have staff at least be allowed to eat in their buildings, not in the hallways and not in closets? Because the situation is pretty degrading to have to do that.
So the first part regarding the barriers, we're researching right now, and part of why we wanted to show that update is to inform the board and the community that we're looking at a range of different things. No decision has been made just yet on which we'll go forward with. But your point is, valid and well taken. That's part of why we're researching that, and we just want to provide everyone with where we're at in that process, because we're getting questions about it. And I would say to any teacher who's watching, and certainly I'm going to follow up tomorrow with principals, I'm not aware of teachers eating in their car or in a closet, and I would agree with you. If that's occurring, I certainly would want to know about that. And it's something that we're monitoring every day. So as it relates to who's in the building, who's not in the building, that's not going to stop. We're going to continue to monitor. So I'll look into that starting tomorrow.
Thank you.
Dr. Padilla, I see no more hands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will have another update for you guys on the 23rd. And again, thank you to our families. We really appreciate your patience. We're going to move 3.2.3 up. This is the transportation update. And I'm going to ask Dr. Spindler and Ms. Coyne to present this.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, can you pull that up on the screen, please?
All right. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Tonight, we're going to take a look at another possible scenario for changing the bell times in order to start the secondary schools later. Next slide, please. So in this scenario, we're going to look at flipping the tiers. One of the scenarios that was identified by Decision Support Group was to flip the tiers and put the elementary schools in the first tier and the secondary schools in the third tier so that the secondary schools could have the latest start time available to them. And in this scenario, Decision Support Group identified it as least likely to require additional buses in the current model. The longest school day is for the secondary schools due to the changing of the classes. So it created a crunch in between the first and second tier for busing, for transportation. So let's look at what the bell times would look at, what they would be in the scenario. So the proposed changes to bell times, you could see that the elementary schools would be starting at the 7:30 time. And the second tier would start at 8:20 and the third tier at 9:10. And in this scenario, with the rezoning of the elementary schools, we have the ability to compress the start time. So in the last presentation that I did, the start times were 7:30, 8:30, and 9:30. In this scenario, we're able to move that up to 9:10 because those elementary zones, the transportation will take less time once those schools are rezoned. So we are able to not start as late, and we would still get out at the same time in the afternoon as the previous scenario. Next slide. Okay, so with the elementary rezoning, not only will we be able to have the secondary schools start later and not add buses, we will be able to actually save buses at the end of the phase-in period. The phase-in approach increases the effectiveness of the transportation, the number of buses will be reduced, and as we saw previously, demographic data will stay very close to what we're doing now. Families still have the choice, and there's a shorter bus ride for the elementary scholars. Next slide. So this is just a review of the elementary zones as they are currently and showing how the students do live predominantly within the zone that they live closest to, the school that they live closest to. Next slide. All right, once again, we're going to look at this slide from the previous presentation that shows how the new rezoning for the elementary school maintains a blend of race and ethnicity in each of the elementary schools, in each zone that we are proposing. So with this, the anticipated outcome is a much later start for the secondary scholars at 9:10 in the morning. It'll alleviate the afternoon time squeeze between the first and second tier that we have now, and that was also in the other scenarios that we looked at. Elementary school rezoning will shorten the bus rides. The secondary school athletic and after school programs will start later, and the elementary school after school programs will end earlier. So students will be home for dinner, where now they're home much later than that. And cost savings at the end of the phase-in for the elementary schools for the rezoning is estimated conservatively between $300,000 and $500,000. Thank you for your attention. Does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Stridiron, I see your hand.
First of all, I want to thank you for all the presentations that you've had. In the 7 years I've been on this board, this is by far has been the most comprehensive and very well put together presentations. The question I had is on the elementary school times. There are a lot of before school programs for elementary school right now. With a start time of 7 o'clock, I would imagine there would be no before school programs for elementary. Is it possible? This question is not for transportation; it's more for the superintendent. Is it possible to have an extended after school program for elementary to allow the students to go home, be home by the time their older siblings can get home?
Yeah, I think we should look at that, especially as a recovery effort. We need to consider how to have extended day to provide more instructional time. And I think that's something we're going to have to do, not just for next year. I mean, I think we're going to have to figure that out for several years in order to support students with what's going on right now. So yes, that is something we would consider.
Board members, oh, Mrs. Maida.
Yes, I just have a question about the secondary ending day. How will that impact like our section 9 athletics? Is that going to impact the rest of the, away games and et cetera?
It has the potential to. And thank you, Ms. Maida. So the committee, we have had this committee now for quite some time.
Sure.
And I know you understand this, so I'm really just saying this for the community. And that is, there are pros and cons to every schedule, right? Even in our current one, there are challenges that we just deal with because we know them. That's a potential challenge for the upcoming schedule, is that we would have to work with Section 9 districts to say, our kids get out at this time, therefore, we would need to play our games later, for instance.
Okay.
We'll just have to work through that challenge if that's the way we go.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Padilla.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Coyne. And just to share with the board, the thinking here is now we've shared with you several layers of this. We had a consultant come in. You got a lot of data in that session. We gave you another look at this rezoning. This is flipping schools in various tiers for, good scientific medical reason. Our hope is now is to bring you a formal recommendation at the next board meeting. So if you have additional questions, I would ask that you get them to us sooner rather than later. But we're going to come to the 23rd board meeting with a formal recommendation. So my team and I are going to sit down at both of these options that we shared with you. And we're going to put our best recommendation forward on the 23rd. Thank you, Madam President. We're going to move on to 2.2. And this is, as it gets queued up, what I'd like to do is just quickly go over the protocol that we have for this stage of the budget process. What we're going to do first is we're going to have a review of the tax levy. So the district at this point is making a recommendation to raise the tax levy. Dr. Spindler is going to go over some key information as it relates to that. And then we're going to ask the board for a consensus. At this stage of the process, we need to better understand which direction the board wishes to go in. And having that information at this point of the process is very important for the planning that we have to engage in moving forward. So that's going to happen. And then we're going to transition right into the budget where Ms. Mineo and I will be going function by function. So for board members, if you remember, Ms. Mineo will read out every code and ask you for questions and comments. And Ms. Mineo, correct me if I'm wrong, you would like to get through 2010 for tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. I just need to make sure what's up is the right one. It is, right? Go to the next slide,
Present your
please.
screen. How about you present your screen?
Yeah, this is.
Okay. All right. All right, so just a couple of quick points on this, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Spindler. Our team has been working very hard, as we do this time of the year, to present you a balanced budget. The balanced budget that's presented to you at this point does include the 1.84% tax levy increase. Again, we're going to ask you for your consensus. If the board wishes after tonight to reduce that, then we have additional planning that we have to do because now the budget is no longer balanced. So I just need to preface the conversation with whatever direction you give us is what we'll obviously take. But just I need to note that it no longer is balanced at that point. As you can see from the information here, we have been a conservative district when it comes to how we look at taxes from the community. And there are a lot of good reasons for that. A lot of districts always go to the top of their tax levy. That is a philosophical belief that superintendent and that Board of Education engage in. We have taken a very modest approach where we have almost, as you can see, for the last 5 years, not asked the community to contribute in the tax levy. Next slide. Okay. What you see here are what if scenarios. So what if at any time during the last 5 years, we approved, the board approved, the community approved the tax levy increase, how much money that would have yielded? So we're trying to show you, again, because we've been very mindful of the community, that we didn't go forward with a recommendation to raise the tax levy. And as a result, you can see there, we could have taxed and received over $12 million, which would have then increased some critical revenue for us, close to $124 million. And what we're asking for this time around is the 1.84 yielding a little over $2 million. And you can still see from what the 123.9 is compared to what we would be collecting, you can still see there's a big gap there. Lisa Marie?
Yes, Dr. Padilla, and you could see there that over time, the levy does change depending on your CPI, depending on your tax growth. So that levy anticipation for next year may be lower than the 1.84% as well, is something that you want to consider that each year. It was consistent between 2017 to 2019. There's a typo there. It should be 2,700,000 in the 2.44. But yes, collectively, there was $12 million that we didn't have the opportunity to build some more programs and so forth. Next slide. So what does that medium household impact look like for our community? For the annual cost for the estimated assessed value of your home. So your assessed value, not your market value of your home. And you can see here per year, per month, and per day, depending on the municipality, on an average home in each of those different municipalities, what budget impact that would have yearly in each of those different municipalities. Also would like to bring the board and the community to another side to show that we have been building and growing our reserves and the difference between the 2019 to 2020. And although each year we've been taking a conservative budget and our revenue in our state aid has been slightly increasing, although next year we know that it will be flat, year over year here in the unassigned, we have to be able to cap this at 4%, but we put our surpluses in our other areas. So you can see here, although this 11.4 million is the cap, in the event that we lose any of the stimulus money, which is about $12 million, that would only be able to sustain us for 1 year. So we have to be conscientious of the fact that we may not have the stimulus money from federal, and the state may not be able to continue to increase their state aid to us. Next slide. I would also like to inform the board and the community that a budget is a three-pronged approach. So we have to use our fund balance and our reserves appropriately, right? We have to take conservative approaches as we did this year. The reason why we're going to anticipate a surplus is because the governor told us in the start of the school year that we should anticipate a 20% reduction. And we had to embrace that impact, right? We still don't have our full amount of, CARES or GEARS money. We still don't know the impact of transportation. There's still unknowns. However, the state is starting to release more and more information. We still have to be conservative in our budget. And because we took those actions, and we froze some hiring and we froze overtime and some supplies, we're able to create a surplus that will be able to support next year's budget. We are using reserves and fund balance to appropriate this budget as well as our local share from our taxes. So we have to see that in concert, those three prongs act to build this budget, right? How are you appropriating your tax levy? How much are you asking for the local share of it? Which reserves are you using, which fund balance, and how are you finding any additional revenue and resources to be able to maintain your programs? Next slide. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, stay here, please. I'll go back one, I'm sorry. What this also just shows that budget to budget is conservative at 1.52%. In the event that there was a 1% levy, we would still have to do an additional reduction of $1.1 million. And if we go to 0% levy, we're looking at further reductions of 2.038111. Next slide. So further reductions without the levy in the event, I reiterated to you what that reduction would have to be. We would have to not fill vacancies. We would have possible layoffs, more operational reductions. We would be increasing, if we chose to increase the fund balance, we're actually increasing next year's deficit and gap. So we spoke about in an earlier slide that we're utilizing 3.9 million to close that gap. That means next year, if we don't have an increase in state revenue, we're gonna have to close that gap again with revenue, with our reserves and our fund balance. And really severely restrict the ability to generate revenues needed to sustain educational programming. As Dr. P showed in his second slide there, every year our tax base is staying flat, with the percentage of the levy will only be able to be on that flat rate. So if you slightly and conservatively raise your levy, you can conservatively ask for your local share to keep up with the expenses that we have in our operating budget, our contractual obligations, et cetera.
Thank you. What I want to just quickly note before I turn it over to Ms. Nail is by using the fund balance, we are already starting next year's budget $3.9 million in the hole. So that we need to, that's right out of the gate. Okay, Madam President, I see there's some hands, and then I just ask for the consensus when you're ready.
Sure, Mr. Stradire?
Thank you, Madam President. If I can go back to slide number, the page 3 of that slide. Every year we hear that we're losing money if we don't raise taxes. But for the last 5 years, there's been a surplus. I would like to know what exactly that total surplus is, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be between $20 and $30 million over those 5 years. It's possible. I don't know the exact number, but we had plenty of money. We've filled the reserves. So the taxpayers, we could have given money back to the taxpayers. And I was hoping that over those last 5 years, we would have done that. But at least to keep the tax levy at 0, we've saved the taxpayers those $12 million from being put into funds that basically just get stocked away for, it says rainy day, and well, now it's a rainy day. So I would like to see the tax levy get 0. And I would like to know, does this budget have cuts in staff? Because I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen any documentation saying we're cutting staff this year. There hasn't been anything provided that I've seen. So can someone answer that?
Dr. Padilla, would you like me to answer, or are you going to be?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things there. Again, we're still in this process. So as we do every year, you will be seeing that. And just to quickly answer, there are no layoffs in this budget, but there are reductions in positions.
In vacancies, not anyone who's right. Mhm.
Yeah.
So we have
So-
vacancies that have been unfilled and not budgeted for, that we are recommending to keep unfilled and not budgeted for.
So we're back to these are not people, these are just positions. But these are people. These are people that when you go back to 5-day a week in September, rather than what we had this year, those unfilled positions are going to be needed. So I think if we approve cutting unfilled positions, we're setting us up for larger class sizes for next year. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with the situation with COVID. And I just think that it's a disaster waiting to happen if we get rid of, I don't even know how many you're proposing or thinking about, but at this point, I don't think that we know the answers because I haven't seen anything. So I don't see how we can make too many decisions tonight other than my decision was to keep the tax levy at 0.
Thank you, Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So what I hear is without a tax levy increase, we won't have a balanced budget, which would mean cutbacks or layoffs or program reductions because the budget wouldn't be balanced. I was wondering if we could expect that if there's a $2 million addition to revenue, whether it's COVID relief, whether it's stimulus relief, whether it's the assembly adjusting the governor's budget, if that reaches that point, that we can go in and reduce the levy down to 0 using that money to bring it back down to 0. If we can get a commitment that maybe that would be the best thing to do with the money, and then we would still have no layoffs, cutbacks, or program reductions.
I want to be very careful. So that is certainly a strategy that the board certainly can consider. I think 2 things. This budget does reduce. I mean, we had to reduce operations and supplies in order to get to this point where we're at. And we also have to note that our enrollment is down. So we can't increase it having enrollment that's declining as well. So I just want to, I want you to know that. And I see there's other questions.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. So just for my clarification, so with the 1.84 tax levy, that is presenting a balanced budget. So the alternative of a 0%, as Mr. Stritter has suggested, would be layoffs in people, or would it be cut layoffs in the sense of not fulfilling and backfilling positions and retirees?
So to the first part of your question, yes, right now, this is a balanced budget that incorporates the 1.84%. We have positions right now, as I indicated, there are no layoffs. If the board decides tonight that they don't want to increase the levy, then my team understands, we've already had this conversation, depending on what the board does tonight, then we are back at this tomorrow, looking at what additional things would need to be reduced in order to close, to get back to a balanced budget, right? So that's the reality. And then I just want to quickly note that we would love nothing more than to have different scenarios. But as we indicated to you in our previous presentation related to the budget, and something that you already know, there are a lot of variables. There's a lot of unknowns. And what we're concerned about is hitting a fiscal cliff, because we don't know what 2 years is going to look like, because there's stimulus money now. And as Dr. Spindler indicated, there's even stimulus money that we haven't received yet. Now, we could receive those. We could receive that money, and then obviously we would have some good decisions to make. You should expect a surplus. You should hope for a surplus every year. And I have consistently said to the community and to the board, we try as an industry standard to get to 2%. So essentially 98% of the budget. You need the contingencies. Last year, we didn't have that. Last year, we almost ran the other way. So it does change based on a number of different variables. So we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful about what the impact of transportation is going to be, the impact of pre-K, and we can go down the list even more. These are just the variables that we have to contend with right now. We always should strive to get a 2% surplus.
And can you speak to the scenario that you stated prior to after the presentation? You said if we do X, if we do so on. So you said we'll start next year's budget process $3 million in the hole. Can you speak to that?
Yes. So in this budget, we are appropriating fund balance. So the board here has said rainy day. Mr. Stridiron just said when there's a rainy day, that's why you have it. Well, we're using and appropriating fund balance in this case of $3.9 million, which means we start next year's budget $3.9 million in the hole, on top of all of our other obligations. Remember, electricity, things go up every year. Health insurance goes up every year. TRS, ERS can go up. Contractual obligations. So when you add the 3.9 in addition to those things, you're upwards of $15 million.
Thank you.
Mr. Stridon, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam President. So as far as the enrollment going down, do we know what the exact number is? Because the numbers that I have, based on every week we get those numbers in the Board of Ed Weekly. So in September, we had 11,035 students enrolled. Last week, we had 10,848. So that's 200 students less this year. But I think a lot of those students went to private school because they wanted to go to school in person. So the trend the last few years is to go slightly down, then slightly back up. We haven't lost the massive amounts that study that was done years ago. Oh, we're going to be down to 9,000 students by year 2020. That never happened. We have more students coming into Newburgh. We have more families moving into Newburgh. So this false narrative that we're declining enrollment, it's not a massive amount that's always said. So I really find it ironic that every year we were told that we're having massive amounts of students less every year, but it's really not the case. I think we can do more if we just keep the budget at a certain amount. We need to find a way to make that work. We can't just say we're going to cut staff, because the more staff you cut, the harder it is for the staff that stays to do the work. So I would like to see what positions are not going to be filled. What's the percentage of positions in the buildings, and what's the percentage of staff that's not in the school buildings and it's in central office? Because we have a lot of people leaving now, and we don't know if are those positions not going to get filled. So there's a lot of unanswered questions that, unfortunately, we come to this meeting to talk about the budget, and we have been provided nothing as far as what the projected cuts to staff are going to be. I mean, we have a couple meetings to do this, but I think this is the first time we've ever had a budget discussion where we actually haven't been presented with what the cuts are going to be for staff.
So I think that's a bit unfair. So, and it's not accurate. So we always present the FTEs later. So I just, for the record, we've actually given you more information than I would say in the past 7 years. What the board has gotten in the past 2 months is a lot more than the board has gotten this time of the year. So I just think it's a bit unfair and grossly inaccurate to make those kind of comments when you have had access to more information than you have. We're at the early stages of this process where we're talking about tax levy, and we're going through tonight, we're going through almost half of the budget. And then when we're done with that, then we bring you all the things that we have traditionally brought you. That's not going to change. So I just let's note that, please. And we just need a decision at this point, so that way we know how we're supposed to, what the next step is. And that's what tonight is.
Thank you. I have one more person with their hand up, Mrs. Santiago.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to ask the opposite of what Mr. Levenstein asked. So if we go down to a 0%, if we agree to a 0% tax levy increase and we get funding afterwards, the gods, everything turns into our favor, and we get additional money projected for next year, that just gets added to the budget, correct, for the following year? So if we come into a windfall of $112 million, $2 million, whatever it is, how does that affect next year's budget?
Okay, so that would affect our anticipated revenue that we anticipate to receive. And then that's noted. And if it's more anticipated revenue than we anticipated, it becomes a surplus to the budget. So that's how that is handled. What I like to say is if we were to receive additional stimulus money, I foresee us really, the federal government will have guidelines to that money. And I really would venture for us to actually expand program to mitigate the COVID slide and utilize that money that way and restore any vacancies that, we may have had, restore, more of those after school programs that Mr. Stridarn was talking about for our elementary students, Saturday programs, winter breaks. I'm sure that is what the state and the federal government is going to want school districts to do with that additional funding. The state has done their part in giving us consistently each year the revenue increases so that we were able to kind of keep up with our budget. Unfortunately, this year, they're only able to keep it flat with the support of the federal government. For me, I look at it with a different lens. I look at it as, wow, what could have $12 million in programs and enrichment opportunities and things could we have brought to our scholars. Right now, we are providing them their basic education with what is required and what is mandated. We are able to support our students in additional things such as CTE because of the state funding. We are able to afford opportunities to students in after school programs because of grants. And those things may start to decline as the economy declines. And we have to, that's why we're positioning ourselves to ask for the local share to help support our scholars.
Thank you.
My comment is going to be, if we are provided with a windfall of whatever money, that's a 1-year thing. And for us to look at that and put that into the budget is a big mistake, because that's giving us a fake number to work from in the future. So I think we need to be very, very careful how we look at that money and how we use that money. So I think we need to be really careful. So Dr. Padilla, you want to know whether or not the board wants the 1.8 or not.
Yes, ma'am.
Very easy. Okay, board members, 1.84% or not. You ready? I'm going to start with Mrs. Maida.
Yes.
1.8, yes. Okay. Dr. Henderson.
No, but I would be open to a lower number.
Okay. Mr. Stridiron.
0%.
Mr. Levenstein.
1.84.
Mr. Walker.
1.84.
Mrs. Burton,
No.
Mrs. Santiago,
No.
Mr. Howard,
No.
and I say 1.84. Who did I miss?
That's everybody, ma'am. You have 4 yeses and you have 5 nos.
So we go to 0 or we go to a lower number?
Lower
Go
number.
to 0.
A lower number.
Lower number. Okay, so I'm going to ask again, 0 or a lower number. Let's start with, I gotta go through, Mr. Stridiron.
0. There's plenty of money in the budget.
Mr. Levinstein,
A lower number meaning like 1? Is that what you're saying? What was put in the presentation?
just a lower number, yeah.
Yes, a lower number.
Mr. Walker,
Lower number.
Mrs. Burton,
0.
Mrs. Santiago,
0.
Mrs. Maida,
Lower number.
Mr. Howard,
A lower number.
and I say a lower number.
You got a majority that would ask for a lower number, ma'am.
All right, Dr. Padilla, does that give you some kind of thing
Yes.
to work with?
Yep, that's exactly what we needed from you guys for tonight, so thank you. I'll just say at our next board meeting, we will come at that point and we'll finish up what we're gonna do next. And then we'll also include what number we'll be recommending at that point to have a balanced budget, along with other additional information that the board would need at that time. Okay, let's move forward. Again, thank you, board trustees, for providing us with that information. And now we're going to go into the actual budget. So if you could pull up the proposed budget, please. Okay. So here, Madam President and I will go code by code. We have provided the board with rationales, as we do every year, for lines that are plus or minus 10%. Madam President, you ready?
Ready. And I will remind you when we talk about the code, whether or not it is in that 10% rationale list, okay? So please bear with me because I'm juggling some papers and also, watching for your hands asking questions. So we're going to start with code 1010. Does anybody have any questions on that code? Mr. Stridiron.
Does the upcoming election expenses, well, not for this year, but for next year, is that in this code?
No, it's in 1060, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions on 1010? We're going to move on to 1040. 1040 is district clerk. Any questions? Okay, we're going to move on to code 1060, which is in the 10% rationale list. It's a district meeting. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. Just wondering if, as far as the upcoming election and the future elections, does this, the budget, does that include money for an in-person voting, or is it also including for by mail? How do you figure out the budget for this?
Would you like me to answer, Madam President?
Sure, Mr. McCoy. Yes, thank you.
So the election plan for May 18th is an in-person election. part of the laws that were passed the other day by the governor, they do allow for COVID-19 as a temporary illness to request an absentee ballot, but the absentee ballots will not be automatically sent to all the registered voters like last year. So it's going to be in person, and anybody that wants an absentee ballot can request them like they have before last year.
So as a follow-up to that, does that change the amount of money that you would need to run an election like this?
The amount of money was reduced mainly because we went to the vendor that now has the electronic poll books, which in the era of COVID is better for us because we're not going to be dealing with the paper. They're easier to clean in terms of when the voters come in. And then in terms of the PPE supplies, I've been in contact with Mr. Velez, and they have enough supplies that we can use that are in district for the election on May 18th. So there's not any specific supplies for PPE in this budget code that you see here.
Thank you.
And Dr. Spindler can answer anything else.
Yes, and I also want to know that this is for the budget for 21-22, so it will be for May 2022, not this current, just to keep that in consideration as well.
Any other questions on Code 1060? Please mute yourself if you are not speaking. We're going to Code 1240, Chief School Administrator. Are there any questions? Mr. Stridiron.
I see there's a salary increase of 3.59%. Is that already baked into contracts, or is that an anticipated raise that hasn't been voted on yet?
Predominantly, that's what's contractual.
Is there a part that's not contractual because there are only a few people in that budget category, so
Yeah, there's a number of
not contractual.
It's the entire superintendent's office, actually. There's 2.5% in there.
I'm sorry, 2.5% is contractual?
No. 2% is.
This is what the answer is. Are you saying that there are 2.5% of the people in that not getting raised?
No, it's 2.5%. No, I'm answering your question. You said, what's the increase? I said 2.5%. What's contractual is 2%.
So the raise is actually higher than the contractual raise?
Well, not for everyone.
Budgeted. So you're budgeting for a higher raise than what's in the contract?
No, only one person in there has it. It's myself and anyone in CSCA. Those are contractual. The others would have to be voted on by the board.
But they're budgeted for just in case?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this code? Let's move on. Excuse me, to Code 1310, Business Administration. Are there any questions? Okay, I'd like to move on to Code 1320, Auditing, and that is in the 10% rationale. Does anybody have any questions? We're going to move on to 1325, District Treasurer, and that also is in the 10% rationale. Are there any questions on that code? Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. So there's an $11,000 reduction. Could someone explain exactly why that would be a reduction?
Yes, our former treasurer retired, and we were able to secure a new treasurer at a lower salary rate.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that code, 1325? If not, we're going to move on. We'll move on to 1330, Tax Collector. Are there any questions on this item? We're going to move on to code 1345, which is in the 10% rationale. Are there any questions on this item? I'm going to move on to code 1420 legal. Are there any questions on this item? Mr. Stradine, I see you waving.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the hand button. I can't find it. So as far as the attorney's fees, is there a way that the board can get a breakdown of how much attorney's fees is like for regular day-to-day attorney expenses, and then how much is it costing the district to do all the litigations? Is there a breakdown, a separate number on that? Is that coming to a different category? Is that, I know insurance pays for some of it, but what additional expenses and attorney's fees does the district pay in the last, can we get it last year on that type of expense?
I'm not 100% sure I know what you're asking. So if you can kind of reframe, I'm trying to write
So
it.
the attorney's fees, it's $295,000. That only covers the standard contract for attorney's fees. When you have additional expenses for litigations that are not covered in contract, where does that money come out of? Or is it just put onto attorney's fees and then we just have to do like a transaction where you move money around to cover that?
All right, let me share it back. And then, so right now we have a retainer. In that there's actually two retainers, there's two retainers, one that deals with tax certs and then one that I believe you all are accustomed to. You're asking what additional fees and costs are associated with the work of our district attorney?
Yes. And then can we get some kind of a report or breakdown of how much it's costing the district every year to protect the district against those additional expenses?
All right, Madam President, based on that request, I know we don't have a report like that, but should the board wish to have us create a report for the past year, I just need a consensus on that.
Yes or no, whether you want that report done. Mr. Stradine, I'm going to start with you.
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
I have a question prior to asking for a report. Would it be better to first ask if there's any expenses above that 295 for additional work before we look for a report?
Okay. Can answer that, Dr. Spindler.
Yeah, so my understanding that is our retainer fee, and that includes the unlimited amount of legal services that we need. I do believe that we may incur some additional court fees for different items, but I would defer to possibly Mr. Shaw to be able to elaborate on that a little bit.
Please, if you're not speaking, mute yourself. Thank you. Go ahead.
So, yeah, we issue to the district every month a comprehensive bill. And as Dr. Padilla said, there are the two retainers, and together they add up to something in the 280s. So there's a little more money in this line than that. To my knowledge, almost everything would be covered within this. However, the billing will indicate that. And we have the detailed records. You may have them as well. And they're subject to review at any time by any board member and any member of the public.
Mr. Stradine, do you still need that information?
I'll take a look at the reports. That's fine. I'll come down in my own time and do it. That way you guys don't have to spend your time. That's fine.
Anybody else need that information? I don't see any hands. Everybody okay? Thank you. Thank you. We're going to move on to a code 1430 personnel. And by that, we mean the personnel office, not the whole milieu of people that we hire. So 1430, any questions? We're going to move on to code 1480, public information and services. That is in the 10% rationale. Anybody questions on that one? Mr. Stridiron.
So I would assume that the position that is unfilled right now is the reason for the 39% decrease.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anybody else? We'll move on to code 1620, operation of the plant. Questions? Mr. Stridiron.
So we're going to go to, I hope, in September, 5 days a week. I'm sure that's probably going to be the case. So I would also assume that we're still going to have to do deep cleaning, and we're going to have to do a lot of maintenance of items, since we're going to have a lot more wear and tear inside the buildings. Do we have enough custodial staff to handle the workload that's going to come in September?
All of the cleaning positions will be filled. So we have some vacancies right now that Mr. Velez and I are working on. And we have reason to believe, we have done some analysis of the square footage of each building and which staff is allotted to it, that we have enough custodial staff to support the needs of our buildings.
And if we don't, are we going to have the wiggle room to hire those people without laying off other people to do that type of work? Because I don't want to sacrifice safety and cleanliness of the buildings for some other budget item. I think it's important that we let our parents know, we let our staff know that the buildings will be fully staffed for the amount of time it's going to take to clean. So because we haven't had this position before. We've never had a full building, and still we're going to be in a pandemic at some point in September and maybe into next year. So this is the first time we're going through this, and I really would make sure that these buildings are clean with enough staff.
Yeah, that's our goal. Right now, we have some vacant positions that we are going to fill. So that way we're up and running, fully loaded in September.
Any other questions on that item, operation of plant? Mr. Stridiron, we're still on the same one, right? Go
Yes, I've seen the school resource officer. So is the plan, I guess, at this point, not to have a school resource officer? So do we have a contract currently with the city of Newburgh, or we don't have one?
No, we don't have one.
Well, I think it would be, at least I would feel better to have a school resource officer in the building. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it, but I would like that item to be filled.
Dr. Padilla, they couldn't offer us a school resource officer, correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah, we shared that with the board.
So that's not even an option anymore?
I don't know. I mean, so your question of filling that position, I mean, we could go to a different municipality and see if they could provide us a school resource officer. So if that's something the board wants to do, we would need that. That's a decision that would need to be made right now.
So
And
at
again,
this point, that $102,000, if we told the city of Newburgh police chief that money would be available for the entire year, they wouldn't create a position for that?
Didn't.
Yeah, the decision to not have a school resource officer wasn't the district. It was the police department.
Have we gone to the other two municipalities?
We have not. But if the board wishes to fill that position, then tonight is consensus night.
Okay, how does anybody feel about that? I need to see some hands. talking about putting back a school resource officer. Dr. Henderson.
Thank you, Madam President. At the time that we were notified that the city of Newburgh could no longer provide the school resource officer, I did make the recommendation to contact the other municipalities to see if they could provide one. So I would definitely be for that. Thank you.
Mr. Levinstein?
I would support looking into it. I don't know if you're going to have a police officer mainly in the high school in the city of Newburgh, if you would be able to have a town policeman there. You need to check, but I would support a school officer.
Not only can they come from the town or the towns, either of the towns, but as I just got a text from somebody, it can also be from the sheriff's or the state police. So it can be from really virtually any law enforcement agency. Mr. Walker, what's your feeling on this? Unmute yourself first, please. Mr. Walker, no, do it again. Unmute yourself. Do it again.
Okay. I don't know. I'll have to abstain for now. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Santiago, what's your feeling? Unmute yourself, please. Mrs. Santiago, unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you. I would say yes. Thank you.
Mr. Howard?
I would need to have more conversation around this. I'm not gonna make a decision. I can't give a decision on that. I would need to have more conversation around that as a board, discussing what that looks like and how it would happen.
Mrs. Maida?
I have to agree with Mr. Howard. I'm not really sure what kind of a job description we're talking about. So I'd like to hold off and maybe speak about that more.
Ms. Manel, can I make a recommendation?
Sure.
Okay. So I do recall having a conversation with police chiefs. So I do not believe that town police officers can fill a city position. However, I didn't go to the state police or the sheriff's office. So I will do that and then maybe come back at the next board meeting and let you know what the progress was like. And if they can do it, I also then have to see if the salary we're proposing is something they would accept. So I can get that information and then bring it back to the board at the next meeting.
So we're going to come back to this code.
Yep.
Okay. Let's
Thank you.
move on to maintenance of the plant. Code 1621. Questions? We're going to move on to item code 1670, central printing and mailing. Questions? Mr. Stridiron.
Could someone just give us a breakdown of exactly the duties of this code 1670?
Yes, I can. 1670 is, we have a print shop at Chestnut that is able to reproduce printing materials for each of our buildings and our Board of Education, including which allows us to have a cost savings in sending it out to a print shop for service. We also have support salaries in there of individuals that deliver our mail inter-office from building to building, and also will drive our mail if there's, for example, there's a snowstorm and our mail is at our local post office and we're having it held up. That individual goes and does that. Our individual will go and be a mail carrier to any bank transactions that we may have to make, and so on and so forth. So that's what's encompassed in there. You're seeing a reduction in the support salaries there because we had a retiree and we secured someone at a lower salary rate in step.
So you would say at this point that the central printing and mailing is fully staffed? Like, has it been staffed at a higher rate in the past? Have we kind of made this a smaller amount every year, or is this pretty much consistent?
To my knowledge, this is consistent. I'd have to go back more than 3 years if you wanted something more than that. But I've done, a 3-year analysis with this budget, and it's been consistent for the past 3 years.
Thank you.
Mr. McCoy, Mrs. Burton is in the attendees. Can you flip her into panelists, please?
Done.
Or somebody? Thank
She's in,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you. We're going to go to code 1680, central data processing. Questions? No? Oh, Mr. Stridarn, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. So this item, does this have to do with the building staff for like typists and things like that? Can you explain exactly who fits this category?
Yep, Ms. Peterson?
So the central server processing line encompasses support staff salaries as well as many of the technology and ITFs. It encompasses equipment for technology and other contractual obligations that the technology department holds, as well as supplies. Technology, and data.
So if some of this is ITFs, and we are relying more on technology now than we were in the last few years, I would think that this is a very important category here. So I would hope that this is fully staffed to the needs that we expect for September and then this next year. So I'm hoping that it is. And I'm guessing if you're proposing it, you're saying that it is.
It is, and as you can see, there's a 27% increase in my overall lines. My technology, the technology budget is spread across several lines, which you'll see further out through our budget presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that code? If not, we're going to move to code 1910, unallocated insurance. Anyone? Question? We'll move on to code 1920, school association dues. Questions? Let's move on to item code number 1930, which is part of that 10%. Are there any questions here? I have a question. Why is it 0?
It was 0 this year, and we were proposing 5,000 for next year. These are for small claims that are brought to the district that we're able to settle. You could use your judgment and claims in your reserves, but this allows liberty to be able to, within your budget, pay small claims out that are against the districts. So we increased it. And when I, again, did the 3-year trend analysis, it fell between a $2,400 and $5,000 range. And that's why I'm proposing 5,000 there.
Thank you, Dr. Spindler. I see your hand, Mr. Stridarn.
Thank you. So that answer was interesting. So you're saying over the last 3 years, payouts from lawsuits have been between $2,400 and $5,000 a year?
I didn't say lawsuits. I said
Okay.
small judgments and claims.
Small claims in like small claims court.
We don't go to, it wasn't for small claims court. I couldn't disclose with you right now what those claims were for. They were board and executive. I know for one this year, and I'm sure Mr. McCoy will be able to give me any other of the small claims that were over the past 3 years.
So small, when you say potential small claims, that's not a legal term, small claims. It's another term.
Yeah, this really shouldn't go further than this. uh,
I'm just trying to understand what the word claims mean.
settlements, claims.
Not-
Mr. Shaw, can you provide the clarity here, please?
This may be in the nature of a very minor amount of money that's put in on a notice of claim. Could be a lost item rather than litigating it, making a payment of a small claim. Other than that, I can't imagine what it is.
So if there were claims of a legal nature that were paid out, is there a public document that people would know exactly how much that amount is every year?
Anybody?
David, you're on mute.
David, unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, I think what you would be looking for is some kind of a form that would indicate a small claim and a resolution of that. And I'm not certain that it would have been by board resolution.
So is it possible that there have been payouts for lawsuits that the board doesn't have to approve? Or every single lawsuit payout?
It's not a lawsuit, Mr. Stradine. She's saying not a lawsuit.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with lawsuits. This is just.
So here's my suggestion. Can something be put in the weekly to help us to understand that? And we'll come back to this item. Is that fair, Mr. Stradine?
Well, I would like the public to know if they want to know if there've been payouts to other lawsuits, how they can find out how much that is.
I think lawsuits is not the terminology. Just as Mr. Shaw said, it could be if somebody had something lost or broken during a school day or a school trip or whatever, and then they needed to be reimbursed for that.
Okay, so it's a different, it's not a legal thing. It's just okay, I understand.
Did that help, Mr. Shaw? Was that a little bit of a?
Yeah, I think that may be the nature of it. It certainly isn't a litigation, a lawsuit.
Carol, you should be a lawyer. You speak English.
I don't speak legalese, I can tell you that for sure. So let's move on, I think. Yeah, I see no more hands. We're going to move on to to code 1950, assessments on school property. Any questions on this? Okay. We're going to move on to code 1964, which is part of that 10%, more or less. And this one, and this is refund on real property taxes. Questions? Okay, we're going to move on to code 2010, curriculum development and supervision. And this is one that is in that 10% more or less zone. Are there any questions? Mr. Stradine.
Thank you, Madam President. So I see that there's an increase of 18% in curriculum and development. So every year it goes up by a lot and they say, oh, it's because we've moved more people into curriculum development. Is that the case again? Is curriculum and development getting even larger?
No, oh, sorry, I don't know, Ms. Moriarty, are you speaking or would you?
No, go ahead, Dr. Spindler.
Okay, so no, it is not getting larger. They are sustaining their current staff and they are sustaining their current support staff. So there was an adjustment made to this budget line this year. And then we're just making sure that we're appropriately budgeting for 2010 for the following school year. But to answer your question, there is no increase of staff or support staff. We are maintaining what we currently have.
So how is an 18% increase in the budget line if you have the same amount of staff?
There was a budget adjustment made over the summer to be able to fund those lines appropriately.
What does that mean? I'm sorry. It's just every year it goes up, and it's always some kind of a term that I don't really follow. Maybe I'm just not understanding.
Let me hear what she has to say, and I'll translate for you.
So there is movement, Mr. Stradar, you are correct. There is movement that goes into that line because we have an ability to support sometimes those staff through IDA grants. We have an opportunity to support them through title funds and other things. So what happens is we have to readjust our title funds and our IDA yearly, and there's people that go in and out. So that's probably why you will see movement within those lines, but I can assure you that we are not presenting or proposing any additional staff in that line. In the event that, you know, that's most likely why you saw the movement happening there. Today is March 9th, and there can be slight variances that happen in a budget from March 9th until June 30th, such as someone moving from a different department into it. And that's why we have those budget adjustments and done at our monthly finance and audit committee meetings. So budget to budget, what we're currently paying out of that line is not that significant of a difference, but it looks different because of where we're at in comparison to next year. So I hope that helped explain it. Ms. Mineo, maybe you can
Yes,
help.
I understand that.
I see him. He's looking good. All right.
Yeah, I understand that now. It is more, it's basically you're taking the opportunity to use money to help with curriculum. But I notice that every year it doesn't go down, it only goes up. But
there are contractual obligations embedded in there as well.
Yeah, if I just like to see an explanation, and I appreciate the explanation.
Thank you. I have a question, Dr. Badia, and I don't know where this would go. So I'm very worried about the kids that, especially the kids in K-1-2, who really missed a lot of those foundational skills that they needed to have. So what I would propose is a full 8 to 9 week summer program, K-1-2, to focus on ELA and math. And then in addition, I would also like to see a K-1-2 school, small class sizes, to work with Mount St. Mary and other colleges to do one-on-one reading assistance for kids that are in K-1-2. We really need to get to those students, those little guys, before we get to grade 4, and that big rush of content area knowledge falls on them when they don't have the foundational pieces in literacy and mathematics. So I guess I'm going to ask myself for a consensus of other board members, whether or not they feel that this is something that needs to be added. And we're in the curriculum area now. So I really would like to see a summer program, a real heavy duty summer program, to make sure our kids, our little ones, our littlest ones, are up to par. We always focus on our high school and our middle school, but now is the time for us to focus on our babies to make sure that they're reading and they're doing math and able to succeed on grade level by the end of grade 2.
You may not need a consensus because our thinking is very aligned. And so I know Ms. Moriarty can speak to this as well. We're actually in the midst of summer school planning now, and we are going to repurpose our summer school programming to put priorities in certain areas. It's also a good opportunity if we get more stimulus money, as Dr. Spindler indicated earlier. That has to be part of the priority moving forward. So I think twofold, we have summer school money that we used last year, and how we plan for that is exactly what you just hit on. Like that, we have to have certain grades in children that are absolutely the priority. Ms. Moriarty, do you want to share anything?
I just want to say that we have been prioritizing, as you just indicated, this planning has been going on for months, and we're getting to wrap it up and really finalize it so that we can move into the actual implementation phase. The K2 is a priority. The K5 in general is a priority as well. We're really looking at the reading, writing, and math, but also ensuring that it looks different than day-to-day school, and they have opportunity for other enrichment activities as well.
Mr. Howard, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. I hear what everyone is saying, but I think they missed a key component of what you said, Madam President, when we talked about the K-2 school that we initially talked about earlier in the year, and we tried to do it at the Armory, but because of the logistics, it didn't work out. I think that's something that needs to be revisited. I think it's so important for that K-1-2 program that we had talked about to be revisited, because as Madam President said, it's so important to get those kids on point, on course, ready to read on grade level by grade 3, because that alleviates so many problems later on during their schooling in the middle school areas and high school areas. If we get it right, K-1-2, then we get it, we fix it, we really fix it. And I think that the conversation that Madam President and I were having with you, Dr. Padilla, I think that needs to be revisited. And I think it should be given some serious consideration, trying to find a way to make that program work.
Mrs. Moriarty, I see your hand. I'll get to you, Mr. Walker. I see you waving. Hold on.
Yeah, I was thinking about when we had initiated that conversation, I believe it was about this time last year, before we went out on COVID with the Armory. And so I was thinking, depending where we are next in September with social distancing and CDC and Department of Health guidelines, we may even be able to do something with the colleges and our schools, working with our K students. And now we have the virtual component too. So we might be able, one way or the other, we'll be able to do something, I'm sure.
I'd like to see one-on-one. Mr. Walker, and then I'll get to Mr. Bear.
I had to throw in, I have to come to the list of my high school kids too. The 10th and 11th grade are really important for kids because they'll start to read the more, or should be reading the more sophisticated, demanding pieces of literature, and they have to be able to respond to them in the same way. Having taught analytical reading and analytical writing, I think that there should be a survey done to see if our kids feel comfortable that they are able to do that, because they too may need some type of remedial work in order to catch up for this past year. Thank you.
Mr. Bear?
I think Mr. Walker stole my thunder. I absolutely agree with a K2 focus. I think we've had those conversations a lot through the curriculum committee. But I was going to point out as well that learning loss is a focus for all grades at this point. It's certainly mentioned in the stimulus package that it's a focus of how the monies need to be used. So as we anticipate a summer program, we're certainly going to include our students at the secondary level who are demonstrating loss as well. One of the things that I know that's a real focus for us when Ms. Murray and I speak is if things accelerate as we hope they do and students can return to school and maybe return to normalcy, we have to prepare students for that. And a summer program is a nice place to blend both academics around learning loss as well as the SEL and helping kids to really begin to heal from this experience and also begin to prepare and have strategies for how they return in September to a world that's hopefully to the one they left a year ago.
Thank you. Ms. Carolyn.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to remind everyone that this is the focus of your library. This is what we've been doing. We do all the time, but we've been doing this, these one-on-one tutoring sessions with students through the Night Lights program of Mount St. Mary's. We've been doing that throughout this pandemic year. And working on the different tutoring aspects as well, and the focus on early literacy, working with the K through 2. We've been doing virtual story hours, and we are planning an entire summer program, primarily outside as much as we can, focused on all age groups, but a large focus on those little guys as well, and really making sure that they're having some fun again and they're connecting, but they are also developing some critical learning skills, literacy skills, and just don't forget the support of your library, because that's what we're here for.
Thank you. Mrs. Burton.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to take another little rethink leap here. And I think we all know that literacy development even begins earlier than, K, right? And, whether it happens in this budget or not, I'd like to say it would be nice to see a pilot program. It could be with the library, where we focus on some high needs kids, maybe, working with Department of Social Services or one of the other agencies, where we're actually working with 1 and 2 year olds, 3 years old, to make sure that they're kindergarten ready. And maybe a small pilot program. And maybe we have some parents in our district already who have little babies that we could begin to work with them that early, and just see where it takes us as an experiment, so to speak.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Something good to think about. Mrs. Maida.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I'm all on board with the K2 idea. I mean, I was in that conversation also, and anything I can do to help, just let me know.
Thank you. Dr. Badia, is this our cutoff point?
This is our cutoff.
Okay, so you tell me, are you done? And then I'll
So
give
I
everybody a
am. I
Mineo
just want
minute.
a quick recap. And are we gonna have a Mineo minute? We are? Great. All right. So just as a recap, board informed us that not to do the 1.84 and to have a lower amount. And so my team and I will work on coming up with a different amount. And then there's some additional work with the SRO. Those were the 2 that I have that require some follow-up. K2 summer program is a big priority. So again, our thinking, and this is part of the academic regression priority in this budget. That's one of them. I just need to continue to stress the budget's not balanced right now. So any changes that we make creates an unbalanced budget. And so that's what we're gonna work on right now. We'll come to the next board meeting with information regarding the SRO and a new tax levy amount and the strategy, what we did to get to that particular amount. At our next board meeting, we're gonna finish the rest of the budget, and Ms. Mineo will take us through code by code for the rest of the budget. And we should at that point also be able to provide the board with additional information regarding reductions. So that's what I have right now as a takeaway. Madam President, that concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Badia. Right now it is 8:56. Everybody, 2 minutes. 2 minutes for a Mineo minute, okay? 2 minutes. Mr. McCoy, can I start again?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. We're going to move on to public comments on agenda items. Mr. McCoy.
There was one comment submitted on agenda items. That comment came from Phyllis Riccardi. Good afternoon. Hope all is well. I'm looking to have my son back in school 4 days a week. I understand some schools have the space and some don't, which I do understand. However, it's not fair. Some kids can be in person and some kids home struggling. Will there be a solution for Gardnertown to be able to accommodate 4 days in person? My son is in 4th grade and he is attending hybrid. Any information would be appreciated. Thank you, Phyllis Riccardi. That is the only comment submitted on agenda items, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. We're going to move on to board committees. Curriculum and instruction, Mrs. Maida.
Thank you, Madam President. As always, our curriculum committee had a full agenda. We have one resolution that will be before you later in the agenda. We had math and ELA presentations, updates on and future plans, presentation for our library reopening, which we're very happy to hear about, an update on our winter academy. Discussion again was talking about regression and anticipation of a quarterly recovery class. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Exceptional Learners Committee. Mrs. Burton.
Thank you. Exceptional learners, we met May 9th. We were presented with an update on student support services, our mid-year update, which included examining multiple measures of data. We looked at attendance percentages, course pass-fail rates, and social emotional survey results and key findings. We had updates from all the supervisors around giving intensive services and interventions to our ELLs and out of district students. A very, very comprehensive, really looking at where students are and providing all the supports that they need to be successful. You're going to see various resolutions coming before us. And we also have an update on the My Brother's Keepers Winter Institute around their mindfulness and leadership practices. And we were given some divisional budget updates, which we just went through. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Audit and Finance Committee, Mrs. Santiago.
Thank you, Madam President. We were the committee that met today before tonight's meeting, and most of the items that we discussed are on tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Secondary, Mr. Bayer.
Thank you, Madam President. Assistant Curriculum Instruction Secondary has one item, 5.1 resolution to authorize the superintendent of schools to purchase laptops for P-TECH.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. Baer. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services, Dr. Roman.
Good evening, Madam President. Student Support Services offers 6.1 through 6.6 as a consent agenda for the board's consideration.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Questions or discussions on the sixes? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roman. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Dr. Spindler.
Thank you, Madam President. Finance presents items 7.1 through 7.9 as a consent agenda for your consideration.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Mr. Levinstein?
Yes, please. I'd like to separate out 7.8.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so 7.1 through 7.7 and 7.9. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions and or discussion? Mr. Levinstein, your hand's still up. Do you have a question? Hello? Okay.
No,
No
ma'am.
questions? Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes.
Ms. Maida.
Yes.
Ms. Mineo.
Yes.
Ms. Santiago.
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron.
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
We're going to move on to item 7.8. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Mr. Levinstein, would you like to talk about this one?
Sure, Madam President. So I just feel the school board should not be involved in arguing assessed values for real estate with property owners. I understand it affects us, and at times it may have a large financial burden, but I don't think that the school board should be involved with making that decision of assessed value of land. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Maida.
Yes.
Ms. Mineo.
Yes.
Ms. Santiago.
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron.
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
No.
Dr. Spindler?
I apologize. That concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you. And we're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 8.1 through 8.10 for your consideration on tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Mineo.
Yes.
Ms. Santiago.
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron. Mr. Stridiron. You're still on mute, sir. I got it. That's a yes. Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes.
Ms. Maida.
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. We're going to move on to the clerk of the board, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from February 23rd and March 2nd, if you'd like to take them on consent.
Sure. Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo.
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President.
Don't you have something? Oh, no. Do we have anything to say about?
Well, the potential board candidates, if you would like to pick up a packet, that information is available in my office. You could send me an email to mmccoy@necsd.net. There's 3 seats that are going to be up for election this year. They're currently held by Mr. Howard, Ms. Burton, and Ms. Santiago. The election is going to be in person on May 18th. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. We're going to move on to public comments on non-agenda items. Mr. McCoy.
Well, thank you, Madam President. We have 2 people that have submitted comments on non-agenda items. The first comment comes from Myra Matos. I'm appealing to you, the board, as the parent of an NFA scholar, as my son, Mateo Cala, is playing soccer and football this season in a year that has been absolutely turned upside down and sadly has been nothing like the senior year he and I had both anticipated for him, and that which his sister, Lonali, had the joy and privilege to experience in 2019. We are absolutely thrilled that he can at least play sports. As a quick background, I've been watching him play football since he was in the 8th grade and have been a culmination over a decade of hard work and dedication for us both, as it is for so many NFA athletes and their families. When I learned that spectators would be forbidden on Academy Field, my heart was broken and I was reduced to tears. My son said, "Without you there cheering in the stands, it will just feel like a glorified practice, Mom." I know that varsity sports are not all about the parents, but yet in a way they are. I, like many other parents, have dedicated hundreds of hours and thousands of miles to my son's sports career, and to be forbidden from witnessing the fruit of all that labor, it is absolutely heartbreaking for all of us. I know that there are tons of issues larger than this on your plate, but if there's any way to make it possible for even a limited amount of spectators, 1 or 2 per player, to attend the varsity sporting events at NFA, it would be so greatly appreciated. We have worked a long time to see our children, NFA scholars, complete their education here in Newburgh and make us all proud of their athletic achievements. If there's anything that I can do to assist in this process, measuring/marking bleachers for social distancing, etc., please know that I am willing to help. Board members, I am respectfully begging for the chance to witness these last games here on our home turf, the beautiful and beloved Academy Field. Thank you for your time and consideration on this heartfelt matter. Myra Matos. The second submission comes from Irene Hughes. Good evening. My name is Irene Hughes. My son is in the 8th grade at Heritage Middle School, who plans to play school sports for spring. While rumors about spring have already been running rampant, I felt it was important to take a moment to ask the board to consider that scholar athletes who play spring sports were unable to do so last year because of COVID-19. As an official decision has yet to be made about the availability and level of spring sports available to our scholars, I would implore the board to keep the fact in mind as they made their decision. As a parent, I appreciate the efforts undertaken to allow school sports in any capacity in such an uncertain year. But I also see extreme efforts being taken to get fall and winter sports to be able to complete this year. Those sports seasons were able to happen in 1920. Spring athletes were not able to play sports last year, and this season has already been shortened if it's able to happen at all. As the board strives for equity at all opportunities, I ask that the members consider that spring athletes have been impacted twice by this pandemic. I'm sure that this is not a fact or consideration lost on the board, but I do ask that you carefully consider it as you make your decisions for spring sports. While seniors certainly suffer tremendous loss in the inability to play, scholars of all ages benefit from extracurricular activities. As you know, for many students, these activities are a major motivation in academic success, as well as the catalyst for mental and emotional well-being. Thank you for your consideration. Regards, Irene Hughes. That's the last comment submitted, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. So I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
So move.
Okay, Matt.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago.
Yes.
Thank you for your patience tonight, everyone. See you in 2 weeks. Thank you.